that brings up the question, how much reality can you take? Our next speaker is going to ask that question of you and answer it too. He's the founder of Formulate. Please welcome Rajiv Menon.
All right, quick question. How many people, can you raise your hands if you're omniscient? Okay, cool. Well, for speaking as somebody who's not omniscient, reality is hard, right? Tech disruptions, elections, Legos on the floor, we get surprised all the time. And I love reality, right? But I'm just not sure reality loves me back. Consider the circumstances of your birth, right? Who you were born to, where you were born, your parents, your genetics, macroeconomics, socioeconomics. There is so much of the world that you don't control. So why are we freaked out? Answer, we are freaked out. We're just in denial about it. So fear, frustration, procrastination, worry, and stress. Stress that is literally killing us. Those are all symptoms of a well-disguised freak out, right? So why is that happening? I posit that the reason for that is we are not fully accepting of reality. We do certain things in the world, we get certain responses back from the world, and we create this bubble where we think we're in control. But are we really? What happens when we get a reality check and something disrupts that? Right? So the longer you stay in your bubble, the more you believe in it, and the bigger the reality check that happens at the end of the day. So what happens when we're wrong? Our brain interprets that stimulus the same way it interprets a physical threat to survival, right? It defends itself with something called confirmation bias. It takes things that are accepting of the facts that prove your case, and you reject stuff that isn't, like Ken was talking about with the climate change. So as a founder of a consulting company, I mentor leaders and teams to avoid those biases, and I practice on myself. So I sent out surveys to find out, about my strengths and weaknesses. I kept a mood journal. And I found that brutal honesty really helped me get better aligned with reality. But the unknown is scary, right? And the unknowable is even scarier. But if you really separate what you know and control versus what you don't, it can actually be kind of freeing. And you can take that understanding and you can understand the aspects of reality and you can actually improve from that. So let's take a few aspects of reality. First one up, as a great philosopher once said, on a long enough timeline, the survival rate for everybody drops to 0, right? But how many of us actually go through life believing that? How many can hear that clock ticking down? And like Steve Jobs said, in the face of death, everything falls away except that which is truly important. And he's dead, so he must be right. The other aspect of reality is it is big. It is hard for us to experience anything except a few pockets of reality. So how do we know what aspects affect us? We don't. So we have to be ready to react to the situation as it unfolds before us. What do we do when reality is big and complex? We come up with probabilistic models that mimic reality, and then we rely on them and we think they're going to be accurate, but we have to keep falling back to the fact that they may not be. And we in Florida, I think, know this better than most people, don't we? Thank you. So the Heisenberg uncertainty principle states that you cannot know both the position and the momentum of a subatomic particle. Someone had a huge problem with that reality, Albert Einstein. He said, God does not play dice with the universe. But guess what? 90 years later, quantum physics is one of the most reliable theories in science because scientists got comfortable with uncertainty. Duality, there are light and dark, progressive, conservative, hot and cold. There are lots of dueling dualities out there that have a tension that is required. If we assume that one of those is right and one is acceptable and the other isn't, we're actually stepping away from reality. So we need to be always accepting of that duality. So if we accept that duality, then we have to find our own balance to balance those dualities. Physical, spiritual, work life, our balance is going to be disrupted. So the better prepared we are for those disruptions, the better we can respond when those disruptions do actually occur. And we can rebalance. Perception is not reality, right? We have mental models, and those mental models are like business models and scientific models. Some are accurate, some aren't. And some can scale, and some don't. So let's take a look at a few things that worked for me. one time my wife, my son and I were traveling. We went to the bathroom to change a diaper, came back, flights left. We were upset, but we decided to take a look around the city and have a trip. And today, that's one of the memories that we look back on because we chose to fix our story. So, my first tip, accept reality fast. If you have a frog to swallow, do it quickly so you can have a mint after, right? The faster you can accept your current reality, the quicker you can influence your future reality. That's tip number one. For our second tip, what if you could be paranoid? You can switch on your paranoia, think of all the bad things that could happen, all the risks. Then you switch off the paranoia, think of all the ways you can mitigate those risks. And then switch to an action focus where you actually execute on those mitigations. You could still fail, but it puts you in a much better situation, and that's really all we can do as human beings. Now, too much reality, bad for you. You could get depressed, right? So you got to engage and disengage with reality as a parallel activity. You engage with reality, get a baseline of reality, you disengage and you create a narrative and a story for yourself that exhibits your free will. And then you use that story to create the energy for you to go out and make that story real. Reality is you have three brains. You have a human brain that is rational, logical, you have an emotional brain that is mammalian, and you have a reptilian brain that actually is about survival. When you self-sabotage, that's literally your three selves having an argument. How do you fix that? Well, part of it is for you to accept your trinity and align them. Mark Twain said that I had lived through some terrible times in my life, some of which actually happened. So let's not let our circumstances dictate who we can be, and let's remember that the one thing we do control is our own story. So let's make it a good one.